I am so excited to be here with you guys this morning. First, I want to share a little bit about why I care about retros so much. Um, Basically, I work with people all day long, and I find that I really enjoy my work more when I enjoy working with those people. And retros really help me build those good working relationships and understand other people's communication styles, so that work is just so easy. Um, so I think when we all have a really good understanding of our team and how they like to work, it just makes the workday so much better. Um, so a little bit about Carbon 5. We're a digital product development consultancy, and we partner with our clients to create software and also to help clients really work on team dynamics so that that team is just functioning as well as possible, just to be able to deliver that product more efficiently. And so you're looking at these circles here. We bring together development, design, product, and really having that collaboration. And our process is that every 3 to 6 months, we as consultants start working on a new project. And that process is like learning about what we're building, kind of getting into that space, exploring some possible solutions, developing that product and iterating, and then launching that product. So, every few months we're working with a new team. And this is a sort of a typical team dynamics timeline here. Bruce Tuckman's Stages of Group Development, which maybe you're familiar with. It's from the 1960s, been around a while, but it's basically saying that that teams go through different stages: forming, storming, norming, when people are all kind of like getting used to working with each other and figuring out how everyone works best, and then finally performing. And you can imagine if your team changes every few months, you really want to accelerate this process so that you don't spend all your time in the forming and storming phase. You just get onto the performing as quickly as possible. So that's one of the reasons why we love to use retros, because it really gets us into that like norming, performing space more quickly. And I think today the real like elephant in the room here is that we are operating under conditions that are really not normal for us. Because of the COVID pandemic, we're working from home. If we're lucky enough to still be working, we're working remotely using different tools. And this is really a stressful and uncertain situation for all of us personally, as well as often in our work world. So I think it's really important that we really treat our remote coworkers with generosity and grace in this time, and really think about what are the ways that we can work best together remotely, given these different circumstances. So we'll touch on this as well. So I have a question for you guys, which is, are you all working remotely for the first time? So this is just a quick poll. You can answer yes or no. Yeah, and I'm just curious to understand, kind of where our audience is. I think if it's your first time working remotely, then there's a lot to learn. And if you have been working remotely for a long time, I would love if you share, some of your tactics and things that work well for you and your team in the chat. I think the chat can be a really powerful way for us to share some information today. Okay, so it looks like we have about 70% of people who have some experience working remotely. They've been working remotely before, and about 30% of people, this is the first time that they have been working remotely. So so great. Let's see, move that over here. Great. And so if we have folks who are saying that like Zoom and Slack are their main tools for working remote, that's awesome. Okay, so I think I'm a little bit preaching to the choir today, I'm sure, since you guys are spending some time this morning talking about retros. But really, the value of retros we'll talk about today. We'll go through step by step how to run an effective retro, some retro prompts just to get that retro off on the right foot, and then how to deal with some tricky situations, as well as answering some of your questions towards the end here. So again, the value of retros. Here's some characteristics of teams these days. Missed deadlines, a to-do list that is a mile long and growing. You're too busy to think ahead and plan. The team is constantly asked to deliver additional work. And all of this kind of too much work is made worse by having like frequent miscommunication and confusion about expectations, maybe deadlines, maybe the scope of work, maybe who's supposed to do what. And as a result of all this, everyone's feeling stressed, and there might even be like particular tension between particular individuals. So if this sounds like your team, which I've been here before, There's really like so many challenges and so little time available to fix them. But today we're going to talk about how retros can solve all of those problems that we have, that I've mentioned before on that prior slide. So you can use that weekly retro to understand those challenges, come up with solutions, solutions that are actionable by your team, not just like asking, folks higher up in the company to fix problems for you, but what you can actually do with your own team. Improving your team's communication, and then building your team's psychological safety. And I've kind of danced around that a little bit so far, but basically psychological safety is like a big buzzword right now, and I think for a really good reason. The Google Rework project looked at what makes teams at Google happy and successful, and they found that teams where it's okay to make mistakes, to take risks, and to ask for help are those teams that are really the happiest and the most productive and successful. So a lot of the things that we do in retros are things that are going to build your team's psychological safety. So now here's that poll that I was curious about. Do you and your team have a regular retro? Is this something that you guys are doing? Okay, so I'm just looking at some of these answers coming in. It looks like most people, maybe like 70%, 75% of people do a regular retro, and then maybe like 30% or so of people, retros are not part of your regular thing. So again, like if you're a regular retroer, share in the chat what you're up to, what's working for you and your team. And if retros are new to you, just listen and pick up what you can, and also know that we're going to send out all of these resources for you at the end. You'll really leave today with a toolbox of tactics that you can use to improve those remote retros. So let's get into the details here, how to run an effective retro. Who should be there? The people who work together day to day. I would recommend not having, all of the managers and stakeholders and peripheral people in that retro. Just have the day-to-day folks there. A smaller group is probably better. It should be a weekly recurring meeting. So we like to do this weekly so that if any issues come up, we can address them really quickly. And we like to have there be plenty of time. Really, retros are there to surface the questions or topics that your team wants to talk about. So you want to leave time for those conversations. So 45 to 60 minutes is a good amount of time. Where do you do this? Traditionally, we would often do this in a conference room with a big table, wall space for some stickies, really to like spread out and like visualize the things you guys want to talk about. But we're all working remotely now, so I think Zoom or other screen share software, Hangouts, that kind of thing, is really the best place for retros these days. And why? It's really just to improve the way your team works together. So, obviously right now we're in a very remote world. We're all working from home, but even when we are kind of back to normal, if you have even one person on your team who is remote, I recommend having everybody just join from their own laptops, so that everybody has sort of like an equal playing field. And the other important thing is to ensure that audio is crisp. I think that having like kind of poor quality audio is really a bummer. So I recommend that everyone wears a headset. It doesn't have to be the fanciest gaming headset in the world, but using a headset that's just going to pick up the voice and not like the ambient room noise is really going to make a difference in the quality of your interactions. In terms of tools, for an in-person retro, Post-it notes, pens, a place to stick those Post-it notes, and then a timer. And then in this digital space, there's a ton of digital tools that you guys can use to run retros. I've used a lot of them. Some can be pretty prescriptive, like it's like all about the process and not so much about the conversation. And sort of for that reason, Carbon 5 has created Stickies, which is a product that I'll show you, which is a little bit flexible. You can use it for retros or other stuff, but I will show you guys how to use that in a few minutes. You want to set the right tone for your retro. So you want to start on time. Even if some folks are late, I tend to just start and they will get the idea that they need to get there on time next time. Welcome everybody. Explain how the retros work. Here's the steps quickly, how we're going to do it, and then model best practices. And for me, I just keep in mind the phrase, be curious. And I'll talk a little bit more about how being curious is really like the best way to approach retros. So the step-by-step, each person writes their reflections on stickies, and there's a lot of ways you can do this. I love to use 3 kind of types of sentences: I like, I wish, and I wonder. I like, things that went well this past week. I wish, those are things that you'd like to improve next week. And it's really deliberate to use the phrase I wish rather than I hate or, I don't like, because it's putting it in a positive way, and it's thinking like, what can I actually do about the situation? How do I want this situation to be? Like, what's the end goal that I want? And then the third kind of type is I wonder. What are you curious about? Sometimes if you want to say something and you don't know how to do it, start to phrase it as I wonder. It really kind of puts you in a good mental space to be asking questions and getting curious, and that can come off as sort of a much more approachable way of bringing up a difficult topic. Give folks maybe about 3 minutes to write their stickies. Maybe a little more time, maybe a little less. You'll see what your team needs. Once everybody's written their stuff, go around in a circle, and each person can read their stickies to the group while sticking them on a wall or while kind of hovering their cursor over them. I think it's really important for everyone to have them written before the first person starts to write. That prevents things like the bandwagon effect, like everybody piling on to that very first sticky, like, oh yeah, that's what I feel too. I don't have any other thoughts for today. I just really just agree with you. Or anchoring, where there's like a sort of a cognitive bias based on the first thing you heard. Like maybe you actually don't agree with that sticky, but because you haven't written any of your own yet, and you read that first one, you're like, oh yeah, I probably agree with that. So just getting everybody to write first and then share is a helpful way to make sure everybody's unique thoughts get out there. Then once you've got all these stickies all out there, people have read them, cluster them by topic. You're going to create what's called an affinity diagram. It's like a way to take a lot of unstructured qualitative data and find the patterns and cluster those by topic. Then you discuss them by topic, and you write a we will sticky, basically an action item for the coming week for how to address those stickies. Great, so I'm going to hop out of our slides and show you Stickies, which is this online product that Carbon 5 has created. And basically you get a board like this where people can double-click to create a sticky, and it's going to change colors based on whether you say, I like, I wish, and then finally the we will. Those will also turn a separate color. So basically we've come into the Stickies board where everyone has written their stickies, and I'll just show you, we have an incognito mode. So this is the mode that we would be in when we're in here and each person is typing their own stickies. I can see my own, but I can't see what other people have written. And you can just kind of sort your stickies by person here. So we've all written our stickies. We're going to go through and I'll read mine out loud. Then Shannon will read hers. Nancy will read hers. Let's turn off incognito mode here. So I'm just going to very quickly kind of sort these by topic. So I'm just seeing okay, I like the new design that Shannon shared. So maybe we'll have a thing about design. We've delivered a lot of stories this week. I like that the new designs unlocked 2 new streams of work. We'll put that together. We can group these as design. We have this other one. I like that everyone's on board with our end of month deadline. So let's see, we've got a couple more here about design. And typically what I do is everybody's read their stickies out loud, and then we all just kind of quietly start moving all the stickies around. So it actually goes pretty quickly. Let's see, we have a couple things here about a deadline, an aggressive deadline. Some more about design. Opportunities to get to know people on our team. So some people said we'd like to get lunch together, so this is team. Something about the backlog and about our deadline. So, we've got this one cluster here about the deadline. Something else here I saw about the backlog. Let's see, blocking new streams of work. So this is So this is kind of what our board might look like, and we can organize that a little bit. So then we can write some we wills, and I'm just going to tackle a couple of these in terms of we wills. It looks like there was some concern about having a really aggressive deadline. Can we move some of these features into V2? So a we will here could be, we will talk to leadership about moving some features into a later release. Okay, so that's one possibility, right? So that's something we could do. Maybe another thing we could do is we will prioritize features and build the most important ones first. Maybe have another one here. Someone likes getting lunch together as a team and wishes we have more opportunities to get to know people on our team. So maybe we'll have a remote team happy hour. That's a possibility here. And how we get these we wills, I typically say, how might we do more together as a team? It's not up to me as like the facilitator of the retro to come up with all of the answers. It's up to me to create space for the team to, to talk about that and come up with those ideas. So I'm going to hop back into here and talk a little bit about what good we wills, what are the characteristics of really good we wills. They're not about blame. They're suggested by everybody on the team, not just the team lead. They're experimental. They're things we can try in the space of a week. And they're assigned to specific people so that it's clear who's actually going to do that work. And they're not too numerous. Probably 3 is a good number. More than that, and it's you really can't actually expect to do that many different things within a week. Help the team follow through. So put the we wills where everyone can see them. Put them in Slack, or maybe put those as actually tasks in your task manager. And then you can start the next week's retro by reviewing the we wills of the prior week. So I just want to hop back into Stickies and quickly show you this. You can scroll back and see this is the we wills of last week. If you've done it, let's see, if you've done it, you can, I like to do a little checkbox. So yeah, we did it. Now we have a little record of that. If we haven't done that, I can copy this and I can bring it over into the current week's we wills and just carry it over. And then if you read last week's we wills and they don't seem relevant, just leave them. You don't have to do things just because you said you would do them if they're now irrelevant. So yeah, I give you permission to do that. Okay, so that's how you can help your team follow through on the we wills. It's great to have different people facilitate the retro each week. Decide maybe a week in advance. At the end of today's retro, I'll say, who wants to lead next week? Help them feel ready and prepared. You can share a blog post with them. You can share a recording of this webinar with them. And then if you have someone new join your team, just share the broader goals of the retro and briefly explain how it works. And in general, it's good just for the whole team to get a little refresher of how retros work as well. All right, so we want our retros to get off on the right foot. So here's some ideas of retro prompts and why you might want them. You want to start the retro with a good energy, get to know your teammates as human beings, and also maybe add a little bit of humor and levity into their day. So some good examples are for getting prompts you can use to get to know your teammates as human beings. Asking about food or childhood is always a good idea. These are some examples that I've used with my own team over the past few months. Where did you grow up, and what's one interesting fact about your hometown? What's your favorite family tradition? What TV show are you watching? And what's your favorite dish you love to cook? So cooking and food, again, is always people like sharing that kind of stuff. And it's not too personal. You can also do some seasonal or timely prompts. Around Halloween, what was your all-time best Halloween costume? For Thanksgiving, instead of saying I like, you could say I'm grateful for, just kind of mix up the format a little bit. What's your signature holiday dish for whatever holiday happens to be coming? That's food again. And then in today's world, where we're all newly working from home, what's your best work from home hack? What have you done to your home office space to make it work better for you? You can also add some just humor and fun. One of a prompt that a coworker used last week. If you ran away to join the circus, what would your circus skill be? So that's kind of fun. And then just last week, I asked in our retro, what's your psych song? What's that song that you play just to get yourself excited for the day? And then I took those songs and I made a team Spotify playlist and shared that with the team. So that was kind of a fun thing. Tricky situations. All right. So retros can bring up some heavy stuff, or retros can be kind of like just that the vibe is not working for your team. So how can you deal with those kinds of situations? Situation one, there's a team member who won't participate. First, I think ask yourself, are they part of the day-to-day team, or do they really like not need to be there? Sometimes people like to be in all the meetings, but they don't actually want to participate. So if that person's not really, if their opinion or their feedback in that retro is not important, just say like, hey, I'd love to give you an hour back on your calendar this week. I don't feel like you need to be in retros. We'll share the retro board with you later, or we'll check in about it later, but you don't need to be there. If they do need to be there, really like invite them to pull up a chair. Be like, oh, so and so, I would really love to hear what your thoughts are, what feedback you have. Like, be like, I care about your thoughts here. You could say that before retro, even just to kind of check in with them. If people are not focused and are not paying attention in a work from work life, I would say do a laptop free retro. Use Post-its. Just pull out the paper so people have to focus. Today, where we're all remote and you really you can't see your coworkers, you don't know if they're on their phone or what they're doing. Just ask everyone to focus. Have them close Slack. Have them have only one tab open on their browser. You can ask them to put their phone away. One company I know sent to all of their employees little sleeping bags for their phones to put their phone away, so it's resting in key meetings. So that's kind of a fun thing to do, but really just getting people to focus. That is really a challenge, I think, in our work culture today that's got constant pings and Slack messages and distractions. Just if you could carve out 45 minutes for your team to really focus, I think people would have such a clearer mind at the end of that. Another tricky situation is that maybe it's a really big retro or people are very prolific in their topics that they want to talk about, and there's just too much stuff. There's just you could never discuss all the topics that come up. In that case, ask people to prioritize. So you can use dot votes, which if you're doing this on paper, you could get these little sticky dots that look like little circles or any kind of stickers, and just use those. Everybody gets maybe 3 dots, and they can vote on the topics that are most important to them. In Stickies, we have a feature that lets you +1 a sticky. So there's a little plus sign at the bottom of the sticky note, and you can just click that. So give people a couple minutes to read over and then vote, and then you just discuss the ones that have the most votes. If there is a hot topic where the conversation is kind of going on forever, going in circles, or is just not relevant for the whole group, you can put that in a parking lot and talk about it later, or maybe with a smaller group, and then move on to another topic. We have on our team right now, we have a dev chat once a week, and so there's some topics that really get in the weeds about the development process or the tooling that designers don't really need to focus on that. We say, okay, that's a great topic for dev chat, put it on the dev chat agenda. I'm glad it got surfaced here, but let's save that conversation for a more appropriate venue. Another possibility is that people don't really contribute. There's nothing to talk about. I think this usually happens because people just haven't created the time and space to think about what they would want to talk about. So you could request that people pre-game. I personally have a text file open on my computer, and I just add to it throughout the week when something happens and I'm like, oh, I wish we didn't do it that way, or this was awkward. I put it in that file, and that's a good place to start for my retro thoughts. Some of them, by the time I get to the end of the week retro, I'm like, oh, I don't care about that. That's no longer an issue. But oh, this one we need to talk about. So I just kind of keep that file going. So that's something you can recommend to your team. I know of other folks who have house rules where everyone has to bring one I like and 2 I wishes, or 2 of each, or they have to arrive with their stickies. And that might work if that's like kind of a good solution for your team. It all depends. You can also start the retro with 5 to 10 minutes for reflection. Just say, okay, we're going to sit, we're going to maybe write some thoughts out, just reflect. This is actually good in our very busy world. Sometimes I actually start a one-on-one with this to say like, okay, let's just think individually about how we want to use this time and like what's going to be the most productive use of this half-hour conversation. Just take a few minutes in the beginning just to reflect. You can also mix up the prompts. You could have prompts like, what puzzled you this week? And this retro is all going to be about puzzle things. You could have just like a totally positive retro. The best part of my week was blah, and you just only keep it positive for that week. Or kudos to, like that's kind of like the like thankful for, kind of like that prompt I shared in the Thanksgiving scenario, but mix up the prompts. There are a couple of there's a tool, I'm just going to double check on what the name of it, Retromat. Retromat is a really fun website that has a ton of little prompts and tools for keeping that retro exciting. Another tricky situation is that people have their guard up. They're not being candid or honest. The long-term solution here is to build psychological safety on your team, make your team a safe place where people can ask questions, be vulnerable, ask for help. That can take time. And like I mentioned at the beginning, like having a good retro, situation on your team can really build that psychological safety. But how do you start? You as like the leader of your retro can lead by example, or even just any participant can lead by example. So you can thank people and celebrate their wins and like convey that like, yeah, individual people on our team are valued. You could share a topic where you're a little bit vulnerable, or you could ask for feedback. So some examples would be like, I wish I had been more prepared in our backlog grooming section, or I wonder how I can make those backlog grooming sessions be a better use of everyone's time. So like really ask for help on the things that you're struggling with. You can start with an icebreaker, so those prompts are a good idea. And then kind of like a whole separate webinar would be to co-create a team agreement. So go through like kind of a session with your team where you better understand each person's working styles and how they like to hear feedback, how they tend to give feedback, and just kind of understand your team a little bit better as people. And I think once you do that and kind of open that up, you might find that people are willing to be a little more honest in their retros. So yeah, I would love to take questions that you guys have in terms of what questions you have for me about retros, or even things people like to share about retros.
Thank you, Jen, so much for all those insights. I'll be reading through some of the questions here. If anybody else has questions, feel free to pop them either into the chat or into the Q&A box in the bottom of your Zoom screen. But a few questions that came in here throughout the presentation. Veronica asked, what's the cadence that you suggest for these, and how far back should people's reflections go?
Great question. So I recommend doing like a weekly retro. So you're really only reflecting on the week that just passed. I think if you've never done one before with your team, you could go back, you could just say like, let's talk about our process. Like what feedback do we have on the process of our team, the process of getting work out. There's a kind of a difference between like a retro and like a post-mortem. Like for example, if you did like a product launch and you want to talk about how did that product launch go, or like what went wrong, you can use a lot of the same prompts that I've talked about, like I wish, I wonder. Those prompts will work really well for like a specific project post-mortem, particularly where something went wrong. But that's separate. I see that as separate from the retro, because the retro is just like the day-to-day, like how are things going. Maybe for your first retro, if you've never done one before with your team, be like, let's reflect over the past month, right? Like what's working for us, what isn't. I feel like it's not super productive to go back in time much further than that, because things are always changing. Yeah.
The next question that came in was from John. He said, Scrum recommends 90 or more minutes for a retro, but you recommend 45 to 60. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I think people are just busy and their time, we have so many like pressing things for our time. Um, I think you can you can like raise those good topics and have a little conversation about them in 60 minutes. If you have more time, that can be great, but that's just a long meeting. So I think it could be good if your retro surfaces some stuff that you're going to talk about in separate conversations. Yeah, that's, I guess, the main reason why I would say like 45 to 60. I would schedule it for 60, give yourself 60 minutes. And then if things kind of wrap up early, people get some time back. But yeah, 60 is my recommendation there.
Do you have any suggestions for how to end your meetings? Some of these meetings can be really tense and frustrating, and it always feels more awkward to hang up virtually.
Yes, I think that's so true. I have a teammate who loves to do like make a little heart shape with his hands to be like, okay, our call is done. Everybody does the heart shape. Or some teams that do like a high five in towards the camera. But you're right. It's like totally strange to end a call in this virtual world to be like, okay, I'm done. Okay, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. See you later. Goodbye. So yeah, just to do like a little fun like sign off. It just like ends everything on a good note. So yeah, little heart shape hands.
The next question that we have is from Lily. She said, I've been running retros with my current team and it often feels like it's just a group complaining session. Do you have any tips on how to improve the conversation?
Yes. So I think really like modeling by example or being like, okay, I can tell we're kind of frustrated about this and complaining. Let's really think about this as like, what are the things we wish? What are what is the outcome that we wish we had here? And really get people thinking about changes that we can make, not things that frustrate us. I mean, it is good to have that kind of group venting session. That can be really valuable. But if that is what your retro is week after week, it's going to get old and people are just going to not want to come because it's such a downer. So I think like just framing things in that I wish mindset, like how do we want things to be and what can we as our team do to get there?
Awesome.
Yeah.
One more question. Damien asked, how much of a retro should be spent going over specific reasons why a given deliverable wasn't finished on time? How do you balance actionable changes and avoid blaming a team member?
Great question. I mean, sometimes there are real concrete things that went wrong and, we don't want to just like point fingers and be like, so-and-so didn't do their job right. But we can kind of understand what actually went wrong and what can we do to fix it next time. And I think focusing on what can we do to fix it next time is the way to do it. Like, do we need a team checklist so it's totally clear what each person needs to do? Do we maybe even need to like take a step back and figure out who is actually supposed to be responsible because maybe that was unclear. But I think, again, like focusing on how are we going to do it better next time, and what are the actual things that we're going to do this week to fix that situation. I think that's where we should focus. Again, like the retro isn't the same thing as like a postmortem. It's really thinking about how can we as a team work better together like this week.
And then the last question we have here for you is David asked, so Carbon 5 created Stickies. How much does Stickies cost to use?
Stickies is totally free. Yeah, it's completely free. You can sign up. You can invite, as many, coworkers as you want to use it with you. It's totally free.
Awesome. Well, those are the questions that we have for you today. So thank you so much for all of those answers and insights. I really appreciate it. So thank you all again so much for joining, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you so much.